finally at Phuket Airport, about to walk out and hopefully meet Rianne, my eldest daughter. Let's see how it goes.
Time now to get a bit of a bird's eye view of exactly what the whole process is like to come back to Thailand. We're speaking to Nick Davies. Nick, well, I've known Nick for a long time. Probably one of the first people I met when I arrived in Phuket some 10 years ago. Nick's a writer, a broadcaster, local businessman, a local identity in Phuket, very well known. Nick, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Tim. It's good to see you. Yeah.
And welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah.
So now, why did you go to England? You went there sometime earlier this year.
That's right. I went back in early February. Usual thing that we have to deal with. I'd done many visa runs, and I wanted to go back to the UK, take care of a few things. I'd been away for several years. It was an opportunity to spend some time with my mother. That's where I stayed when I went back in Portishead. Well, basically, yeah, the plan was to spend a short time there. I was also taking care of, just a few things, and maybe it was an attempt to set a few things up for, the distant future with my kids as well. We'd just got their British passports, so I was taking care of that kind of thing, kind of trying to get things established somewhat for the future, for several years down the line. So I thought I would be there for maybe about 3 months, and so this was early February when I went back, and even on the flight that was passing through Singapore back to the UK, there were some people that were being refused to get on board the flight because of the whole COVID problem. The situation with it was a Chinese family that was in front of me, and the person issuing the boarding passes was refusing them entry onto the plane simply because of the amount of time they'd been in Phuket, and so they were being told, no, you're not allowed to go to Singapore. So that was the first sign that things were really kicking off, and there was really a clampdown going on.
So now your situation was you had a Thai partner, a Thai wife, and a Thai family.
Yeah.
So, and under what circumstances were you allowed back in? What visa situation got you back in?
Right. Yes, the fact that I have a Thai spouse, and of course we are officially married. This was one of the prerequisites.
Right.
So yeah, based on that, that I then began making the application to get a certificate of entry. But this wasn't until around September time. So this is obviously all the time between February and September. There was no way of knowing. Well, they didn't make any announcements. And then the announcement came that I could then apply for the certificate of entry based on the fact that I had a Thai spouse.
What other paperwork was required so you could come back?
Well, it was what wasn't clear at first was this new certificate of entry. Was that a replacement for the visa or not? So it took me several weeks to even find out that. Okay, so it turned out I needed the visa first, which was, as usual, I had to supply proof of my marriage, so the marriage certificate, my wife's ID, a copy of my wife's ID card. I provided my children's birth certificates, and also the house certificate of my wife. So that was enough for the visa application. So that was the first thing I did. And after that was then with the visa, making the application for the certificate of entry. So this is all, of course, done online, and it was all. I think a lot's changed. It's a work in process, obviously, and new territory for the embassy staff,
for everyone.
Everyone else. Yeah, for everyone. So again, it was very difficult to get the actual information. So we were told that in order to apply for the certificate of entry, again, the proof of marriage was essential. Also, a pre-booked hotel.
This is the ASQ.
That's right, the alternative state quarantine hotel. So that was all down to us I had to just basically choose that from the list of those that are registered as ASQ hotels.
What sort of costs were involved with the ASQ hotels? What was the range of opportunities you had to book?
Minimum was about 30,000 baht.
For the 14 days?
Well, yes. So that was the cheap end, ranging from 30,000 to 60 or 70,000 for the higher end kind of 5-star hotels. So
you went for the 5-star hotels?
No, I went for the cheap end. And actually, it's interesting because some of the I've seen feedback from people that went for an expensive hotel, and they didn't have a balcony, so they were in this sealed up room
box
with no wind. No windows, no fresh air for 2 weeks, which was actually quite traumatic for some people. But
yeah, I can imagine. So apart from the ASQ, I suppose you had to organise a flight as well. You had to book a flight.
Correct. And again, this was a very, very confusing and frankly traumatic issue. At first, it was announced that only Thai Airways was flying from the UK to Thailand. And the way that was done was you couldn't pick a date, you couldn't really do it any other way apart from this kind of almost like a lottery system. And they would announce, again, it was all done online. So as far as I understand, there were thousands of people. There were basically 7,000 Thais alone trying to get back on these repatriation flights from the UK. And then thousands of other expats in a similar situation to myself. A lot of retirees as well that will somehow find themselves away from Thailand, but they've got property or something in Thailand. They didn't have any recourse to get back at that time. And I think that's still something that's in the pipeline at the moment.
Yes, certainly. And people who have got Thai partners, but not necessarily a legal marriage certificates, also can't get back at this time. Nick, let's have a talk about the costs that you had to incur apart from the ASQ, the flight. I imagine that was quite expensive.
Yeah, actually, okay, so I went for an Emirates flight. Eventually, the embassy let me know by email that I could buy an Emirates flight. So I contacted Emirates directly, and I honestly can't remember the exact price. It was around £500.
Okay, it was not too bad.
Yeah, actually cheaper than the Thai Airways flight.
That's not uncommon.
Yeah, and it turned out that there was a lot of space. I understand that the Thai Airways repatriation flights were absolutely packed, whereas I had a whole row of 4 seats to myself on the London to Dubai flight. So that was quite nice in the end. So a good deal there. So there was that. So the ASQ was at least, well, it was about 35,000 baht. The flight was about £500, and also had to get insurance coverage, which specifically states that you're covered for the eventuality that you contract COVID and have to be hospitalized or repatriated. And so that was the minimum coverage of $100,000. And so, again, this was a massive search. It was obviously new territory for the insurance companies. So, again, had to kind of find which would be the best option. Could I get just the coverage that would allow me 3 months coverage rather than the whole year, things like that. So I ended up spending about 315 euros on the insurance.
On insurance.
To cover me for the 3 months, yeah.
How did you end up paying for all this? I mean, you're not the wealthiest man on the island, so how did you manage to pay for all this?
It turned out to be quite a very fortunate situation. I have a YouTube channel and quite a few, about 11,000 subscribers, and one of my friends who has a YouTube channel as well in the same kind of genre basically pushed me to launch a GoFundMe campaign and helped me do a kind of he called it a Nick Home-a-thon. And so we launched this campaign with the goal of raising £2,000, which was what I'd calculated would cover the cost of the insurance, the flight, and the ASQ stay, as well as the COVID tests, which had to be done privately beforehand within 72 hours of flying. Another very, very tense thing. So we launched the campaign and did this kind of live Get Nick Home-a-thon. And within a couple of days had raised more than £3,000 thanks to this wonderful, generous support from, well, people all over. You
wouldn't have been able to get back without those funds.
No, definitely not. And of course, all these big costs had to be paid up front. The stay, etc. So there was no way of getting that certificate of entry until all of those things had been paid for up front. So it was an amazing response, and that's basically how I was able to raise the money. Yeah.
What was the reception like when you arrived in Bangkok at Suvarnabhumi, I imagine?
Okay, very, very efficient, I must say. You arrive and they've got the seats all there. It's all, of course, the certificate of entry has your date and the flight numbers on it. So it's not just an open thing. Obviously, if there are any changes, then you have to, the certificate of entry would have to be changed as well. But I must say that once all the documents were in place, the embassy was very efficient issuing my visa. It's 4 working days, posting it off and getting it back in the post. That was fine. And then the certificate of entry, again, once all the documents had been provided, they returned that within 24 hours. So they were very efficient in that respect. So once I arrived at Suvarnabhumi, again, very efficient. We were greeted, and it was almost... they had a whole bunch of people assigned to, and it was this procedure where they check your documents, check your insurance, and they check your visa. Well, no, the visa thing came later. So all the other documents related to the certificate of entry were checked first, and only then would you be allowed through to finally do the immigration stamp.
Was it a bit like flying into like a sort of a dystopian Hollywood sort of a pandemic set?
It was. They were the full garb. They really were dressed. Obviously, we had to wear a mask throughout the flight, and of course in the airport as well. So
they're in full hazmat outfits.
Oh yeah, the whole works. The masks, the visors, and everything. And So once I was through all that, again they direct you through all these channels. Apart from that, the airport's obviously very, very quiet.
Yeah.
We were all arriving as one flight and being sent off in single file, picked up the bags, and then going through, there was they didn't do any kind of bag checks or anything like that. Going through the customs, there was nothing really going on there.
You didn't bring any Turkish raisins back or anything?
No, I'll tell you what though, I did get thoroughly examined in Heathrow at Heathrow Airport. Maybe they were just using the opportunity because of that. Again, it was very quiet. At the Emirates counter was the only counter that was really had any people. And Terminal 3 at Heathrow is completely closed because there's nothing really going on. So again, I think they were taking that opportunity to do the whole thing. I had to do the scan and the pat down, and the bags were opened up and all that. But
the most fun you've had in a long time.
yeah, being frisked.
Now, Nick, tell us about the quarantine. So you chose a sort of a 3-star sort of option. How did you cope with the 14 days in isolation?
It was, first impressions were quite strange, because obviously we're all familiar with that very warm Thai hospitality, and you're really treated, as you said, like as if you got it, even though of course they've done COVID tests and everything beforehand. But they basically, you're brought to the hotel in a minivan alone. There's a plastic screen between you and the driver. Once you're put through the back entrance, you're not taken through the lobby. It's the service entrance that you're taken through.
Oh dear!
And I noticed,
much of a welcome, is it?
Yeah, it seems very, very unfriendly, because obviously there's no smiling, and they're keeping the distancing. And I saw that once I descended from the van, the guys there spraying it the inside of the van as if it's been contaminated. Of course, I understand that they are following protocol, and they're under strict observation I understand that they're being observed by the military. So they're checking your temperature again, and they sat at this table, and you've got to walk through disinfectant foot baths, and so again they're all dressed up, and so it seems very unfriendly. And then you're taken through a separate lift. They've got a designated lift for the COVIDies. And it's funny, going up in the lift, they've actually got these footprints on the floor, so anyone in the lift have got to face the corner. So the guys in one corner, I'm in the other corner, and no talking.
I usually do that anyway. Nick, people always want to know, when talking about the quarantine, what was the food like, and could you have a drink?
Okay, obviously, it's understood that you're not allowed to drink, so they obviously won't serve any alcohol, and they won't get any for you. And even if someone delivers food packages for you, which they're allowed to do, they will check those food packages for alcohol, as well as a friend of mine he brought some snacks and things, but yogurt, I asked, it wasn't allowed through, because they were afraid it's perishable.
Got bacteria in it, I suppose.
Yeah, and I even asked for, so the food was, I don't know, there was 3 meals a day, and it's served in a plastic thing. They leave it outside your room. Breakfasts were horrible. I could hardly eat them, because it's just these kind of, these processed meats and things. For some reason, they thought that would be what I would enjoy.
Was it a Western breakfast, or a continental, or a Thai breakfast?
It was the Thai attempt at a Western breakfast.
I get it. So the little sausage and a piece of overcooked bacon and a fried egg.
Yeah, it was usually kind of scrambled egg, and the sausages, and a slice of white bread, and a tub of margarine, and it really wasn't very appetizing at all. Lunch was usually okay, so it was nice you could choose. They would basically allow you to choose between maybe 4 or 5 different dishes for each meal through a Line app. So obviously I went through all of those, and they also had a room service menu. So I must admit, that was nicer. I could order kind of Thai food, but again, it was all at specific times. So you'd have to plan it out. They would deliver, for example, even room service might not be delivered until a specific time. So you couldn't just order when you're hungry.
What did you do for exercise?
I just tried to use the balcony and got to just whatever I could do, press ups and things like that. But I wasn't until after a few days after the first COVID test, which was on day 5, that I was even allowed up onto the rooftop.
Right.
So then I would walk around or try and jog around. But that was about an hour So that's all I could do for exercise, really.
Let's go to the big moment, of course. After 9 months away from your family, you obviously had a flight back to Phuket. Tell us about the reunion.
It was fantastic. Obviously, you know, we'd been building up to it. My eldest daughter, Rianne, has been the one that I've been mostly communicating with because she's, you know, tech savvy. So my wife and my eldest daughter knew that I was coming home, so she was there ready to meet me at Phuket airport, and she'd arranged for a friend of hers to film us meeting outside the airport. And
we're sharing some of that footage.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Very emotional. It was. I mean, you know, you can imagine that so much tension had built up. I mean, it's not until you actually get there that you really, you know, because there's so much uncertainty until then. So it was a huge relief. I was overcome to see her, and so that was a wonderful moment. And then, yeah, it was a short drive to our home in Phuket. So, as I said, the younger kids didn't know it was a Saturday, fortunately, so they were all at home. And
surprise!
Yeah, it was quite funny. I mean, my dog was behaving strangely, didn't immediately greet me. That was weird. But I went in my youngest daughter, she's 4 years old. She didn't know what to make of the situation. I think it's such, you know, that amount of time for a young child is obviously much longer in the child's mind. So she didn't know how to react. Obviously, you know, I gave her a big hug and picked her up and
who's this strange man touching me?
yeah, it was quite strange. Again, it was very emotional. But then, you know, the older siblings came out from their various rooms or ripped themselves away from their phones, realizing there was some commotion going on. So it was wonderful. They had an inkling that I would be back soon because they knew I was doing the quarantine, but they didn't know when I would be back. So yeah, again, it was wonderful. They kind of all came in and threw their arms around me. We had a big hug, and it was fantastic. It was wonderful.
Nick, what's your overall impression of the whole thing? Were there any surprises about the whole process? Obviously, it was difficult, it was expensive, it was cumbersome. But what's your overall impression of the whole getting back to Thailand issue?
I mean, visas, we know, are usually fraught with all kinds of hurdles anyway, and there are so many things you have to find out by yourself. And even now on the forums, there are some Facebook forums that are very helpful, and it's because again, getting the information from the embassy is like extracting teeth. They are efficient once you have the documents in place, but to actually get them to tell you exactly what the process is, that information isn't there. So yeah. Again, even as I said, even to find out, I've seen a lot of people, in fact, I know of people who have been turned away at the airport because they assumed that they were issued the certificate of entry without having a valid visa. So these are the kind of hurdles that something I posted once I found out is get your visa first. That's the most important thing. That's what you need. But
that's the ticket to ride.
Yeah. So after that, you can everything can kind of fall into place. So it was. Yeah, I think personally, I think just having spent so long in this country and having to deal with visas so often, you expect the unexpected. And I've got, the paperwork is like that. You know, I just copies of everything, just making sure that everything all the T's are crossed and the I's dotted. I think for a lot of people who might not have experienced that, will end up tripping up, and it's such a shame to know that. I think what the most difficult, the most challenging part of it is the COVID tests. So of course this whole industry has grown There's the insurance, which has come about, of course, but the COVID testing industry, you can't rely on in the UK, it's the NHS, the National Health Service. You can't rely on that because you need to have basically the testing done within 72 hours of your departure. But it's still confusing as to whether no one really knows for sure whether the test itself has to be done within 72 hours or the results. So most of the time, if you're dealing with these private clinics, they'll try to get the tests back to you within 48 hours. There's also a fitness to fly certificate which needs to be issued separately. Now, this isn't the usual kind of, you don't have to do it's not like an elderly person would have to do to see if they're fit to fly. Again, it's just one of these extra pieces of paper that confirms you didn't have COVID symptoms at the time. So that's important to point out. So if for anyone that's trying to go through this process, I personally did my best to butter up the clinic that I used, and I provided them with a template to say, please just put this on a piece of paper. I need these 2 pieces of paper. And again, it's all new territory for them. But this is something that's prevented people from being able to return as well. They didn't have these specific words, fitness to fly and free of COVID symptoms, on both of these certificates.
Nick, apart from obviously your family, what was the one thing you missed most about Thailand or Phuket?
The food is a major thing, obviously, being back in the UK for a while was a really you just don't see the vibrant lifestyle over there that you do here. It was that it seemed very sterile over there. You've got your supermarkets, but there's nothing else really going on the streets. And of course, I went back at a time that was, it's a paradigm shift, really. This whole thing has changed the whole culture. So, I missed that kind of easygoingness of the Thai culture, and that kind of freedom to just you can pop down the shops and go, or you can there's always something to buy down there to go and eat and what have you. So that was very much, this is very much part of the Phuket or the Thailand lifestyle that I did definitely miss. Of course, the weather is one thing, but it was nice to see it was nice to be back in the cool for a while. I mean, the heat now is oppressive. It's
No, it's not. This is normal, Nick. This is normal. Nick, we do appreciate you sharing this story with you. I mean, it's a 9-month saga, and you've got to the end of it. You've got back home. So welcome back, and we'll look forward to getting some response from this, and I'm sure we'll probably get a lot of questions under the video as well. But thank you for your time. Welcome back, and we look forward to seeing you wherever you pop up next.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I hope it helps, and I would be happy to give any advice or answer any questions, having gone through the experience myself. They're not out to get you. That's all I would like to say. Everyone's following protocol, and they're not out to trip you up. If you just do it, and do it in the Thai way, patience and step by step. If you're in that situation, you'll get here.
Nick Davies, thank you.